Dear students, now I am going to explain you about pancreas and adrenal glands. First, pancreas. Pancreas is a functions as a both exocrine and endocrine gland. Exocrine means the gland with the duct, it secretes pancreatic juice. Exocrine part of the pancreas is the acinar cells. So, they secrete pancreatic juice which contains digestive enzymes. You know that endocrine part is they are called islets of Langerhans. So, they are the clusters of endocrine cells. Those are present in the form of a small patches. You will able to see here the dotted in this. So, these irregular group of cells, endocrine cells, for the first time discovered by Dr. Paul Langerhans in 1869. That is why they are called the islets of Langerhans. They constitute about 2% of the total pancreas. If you take one group, such group of islet of Langerhans, you will able to see in that there are different types of endocrine cells. Those are alpha cells, beta cells, delta cells, epsilon cells and pancreatic polypeptide cells. So, all these cells they release a specific hormone in response to the signals. So, alpha cells secrete glucagon, beta cells secrete insulin and delta cells they secrete somatostatin and pancreatic polypeptide cells and the epsilon cells they secrete ghrelin. So, first very important you know that beta cells of islets of Langerhans. So, these beta cells they comprise up to 60% of the islet mass. They release insulin, a peptide hormone that decreases the glucose concentration in the body by stimulating the glucose uptake by the liver, skeletal muscles and adipose tissue via specialized receptors. So, there will be glucose receptors of liver and skeletal muscles, adipose tissue. When insulin bind to the insulin receptor, so that you can see the glucose is transported or absorbed by these cells. So, that is how the glucose uptake by these organs. So, whenever there is the high glucose level in the blood, whenever there is high glucose in the blood, glucose is transported to the liver, muscles, where glucose is converted into glycogen, that is the glycogenesis. So, the cell cannot keep more glucose in the plasma. So, that is it induces in the liver and also in the skeletal muscles. So, these the excess glucose is converted into glycogen and gets stored. Then the transport of more glucose to adipose tissue, to the fat tissues or adipose tissue, where glucose is converted into fat, lipogenesis and gets stored. So, it inhibits lipolysis, breakdown of the fats and gluconeogenesis, glucose formation from the fats and the proteins, and glycogenolysis, breakdown of the glycogen into glucose. All these processes are inhibited, thereby it regulate the glucose constant level of glucose in the blood. It is about 90 to 100 mg per 100 ml of blood. So, insulin is a one hormone, it having multiple function and it works at multiple sites. It also brings the synthesis of muscle protein and it brings the active transport of amino acids into the cells and stimulate the protein synthesis in the cells. So, then it also stimulate the uptake of potassium ions into the cells and managing the excretion of sodium and maintain fluid volume in the fluid volume of the urine. It enhances the memory and learning capabilities of the brain. So, so many functions you will see apart from the glucose homeostasis. So, insulin also brings other functions and the alpha cells of islets of Langerhans, they comprise about 30% of the islet. They synthesize glucagon hormone. It is also a peptide hormone. The primary catabolic hormone, it is in the body. It raises the concentration of the so it works opposite to the insulin. So whatever the insulin, the functions, the opposite to that you will find in the case of glucagon. So antagonistic you will find. So glycogenolysis, it bring the insulin brings the glycogenesis, it glycogenolysis, conversion of liver glycogen to glucose. Gluconeogenesis, formation of glucose from proteins and fats. Lipolysis, breakdown of the fats in the liver and the adipose tissue. So insulin and glucagon hormones are antagonistic in action, maintain glucose homeostasis, constant level of glucose in the blood 90 to 100 mg per 100 ml of blood. When the blood sugar is too high, the pancreas secretes more insulin. When blood sugar drops, then pancreas releases glucagon to increase the blood sugar level. This balance helps to provide sufficient energy to the cells and preventing the nerve damage that can result from the high levels of blood sugar. So this is you will find this flow chart how exactly the glucose homeostasis is established in the blood. So whenever after the heavy meal you will find increased level of blood sugar in the increased after eating lot of carbohydrate rich food. So immediately the beta cells secrete insulin. Insulin, you know that it make the body cells to take up the glucose, liver to take up the glucose and conversion into glycogen, similarly to the skeletal muscles. So all the removal of the excess glucose in the blood. Then when you starve or when the sugar level goes down, immediately the alpha cells they secrete glucagon. So the glucagon functions opposite to the insulin, it increases the blood glucose level. So it liver breaks down glycogen into glucose, the fat lipolysis. So all this increases the in this way the functions of insulin and glucagon, the normal level 90 mg per dl will be maintained in the blood. So when the beta cells fails to produce adequate amount of insulin, that is the hyposecretion of insulin, so or else the body cells they do not respond to the insulin. This leads to the disease diabetes mellitus. So India is the leading country in diabetes mellitus, as we are our main diet is carbohydrate based diet. That's why the Indians are more prone for these diabetes. So India is considered as the capital of the diabetes. So that means you will find it is 1 in 5 prone for getting diabetes if the person is not having a proper the habits or it is a lifestyle disorder. So what is the characteristics of this symptoms of this diabetes? Hyperglycemia, increased blood sugar, glycosuria, that is excretion of glucose in the urine, polyuria, increased urination, and polydipsia, that is the feeling thirsty, and delayed tissue repair. All these are the symptoms. So this is what in this table you will find what is the blood sugar level or glucose level during normal person and the diabetic person. So it is in the diabetic person it is 70 to before the breakfast it is 70 to 130 mg per dl, whereas the diabetic about 100 mg. So after the meal in the case of normal person it is 140 mg per dl, whereas in the person diabetics it will be 180 mg. So you will find the variations in the glucose level in the diabetic person. There are two types of diabetes, type 1 diabetes, they have to take insulin every day to maintain the glucose level. Then insulin dependent diabetes it is called. Type 2 diabetes are called insulin resistant diabetes. This is managed by taking insulin and also lifestyle changes, and this is the more persons are suffering from type 2 diabetes. It is onsetting after 40 years. So it is that it is brings the changes, losing weight, making healthy food choice, all these helpful to control this type 2 diabetes. Then other cells you will find delta cells, epsilon cells, and pancreatic. Delta cells, they release the somatostatin. This hormone inhibits the secretion of glucagon and insulin. Epsilon cells of the islets of Langerhans, they secrete ghrelin, and this hormone stimulates the appetites, increase the fat storage, stimulates the growth hormone release from the pituitary. And then the pancreatic polypeptide, so which is a satious hormone, and it is decreases the gastric acid secretion, gastric emptying, and all these functions they have. Next gland is the adrenal gland. It is also called suprarenal gland. It is present just above the kidney, that is why it is renal means kidney. So you will find the adrenal gland having two parts similar to pituitary. This outer is cortex, and the inner you will find the medulla. Even though they in a single gland, but these two parts of the adrenal, they are actually totally they are different histologically. Histologically these are chromophene cells, and these are you will find epithelial cells. Then functionally the adrenal cortex secrete steroid hormones, whereas adrenal medulla secrete amine hormones. Then you will find embryologically these are the part of the sympathetic nervous system. Adrenal cortex is the part of the it is similar cells. It is gonad and adrenal cortex, they derive from the mesoderm. So that is how. Then the adrenal cortex having three types of cells. So the zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, zona reticularis. Zona glomerulosa secrete mineralocorticoids, zona fasciculata glucocorticoids, and zona reticularis sex steroids. And adrenal medulla secrete amine hormones, epinephrine and norepinephrine, adrenaline or noradrenaline. So adrenal cortex, it is having three layers. So that is the zona glomerulosa secrete mineralocorticoids. So the corticosteroids or corticoids are the hormones secreted from the adrenal cortex. They are about 40 to 50 steroid hormones. So they are synthesized from the basic substance cholesterol. Mineralocorticoids, there are about 20-25 mineralocorticoids secreted by zona glomerulosa. They maintain electrolyte balance, that is the balance of the sodium ions, chloride ions by the distal convoluted tubule of the kidney. So they promote excretion of potassium, magnesium, hydrogen ions, and ammonia, and maintain the water balance in the blood. So among the mineralocorticoids, aldosterone is very important. This hormone helps to maintain the body salts and water levels, which in turn regulates the blood pressure. Hyposecretion of this hormone in extreme muscular weakness and hypertension and edema. So this adrenal cortex negatively controlled by the hypothalamic CRH, cortico releasing hormone, and the ACTH of the adenohypophysis you have studied already. So then the glucocorticoids from the adrenal cortex secreted by zona fasciculata. So they have got similar to glucagon type of functions. They stimulate the synthesis of enzymes involved in gluconeogenesis, thereby increase the blood sugar and inhibit the glucose absorption by the cells. They are anti-allergic, anti-inflammatory, and they increase the WBC content in the blood. Then they increase the gastric juice production. So, among glucocorticoids, cortisol and cortisone are very important. There are about 30 types of glucocorticoids. Cortisol plays an important role in the using the carbohydrate, fats and the proteins by the body. It is functions as anti-inflammatory. It increases blood sugar and it regulates the BP, regulates the sleep and wake cycle, that is the circadian rhythm. It also restores balance during stressful situation. So, during stress the increased level of cortisol bring all these reaction. Then another cortisone, this also works along with the cortisol, regulate the immune response and suppress the inflammatory reactions. So, adrenal cortex, low quantity of sex steroids produced in reticularis, zona reticularis. These sex hormones, they are not having much impact on this because of the greater amount of these sex hormones produced estrogen and testosterone by the respective gonads, ovary and the testis, that is why. So, then what happens, there is a hyposecretion of the adrenal cortex, already I discussed when the hyposecretion of the ACTH, it is Addison's disease, muscular weakness, and when whatever the hypersecretion, Cushing disease, you can see the abnormal accumulation of the fats in the cheek, moon face and all this you can see. Then hypersecretion of adrenal cortex in children, sometimes precocious early development, sex development and masculization in the case of females. Then adrenal medulla synthesize hormones called epinephrine and norepinephrine. The ratio of this, these are called catecholamines and there are about 80% epinephrine, 20% norepinephrine. These synthesize with the amino acid tyrosine, which is taken up by the chromaffin cells. So, that is of the adrenal medulla cells, and the secretion of these hormones is stimulated by the acetylcholine released by the sympathetic nervous system. So, these are stress, in response to the stress, they stimulate these adrenal medulla to secrete these epinephrine and norepinephrine, and sometimes you can see in the exercise, hypoglycemia and during the accident and trauma conditions, these hormones are secreted and they bring you can see they help prepare the body to come out of this stressful situations or the trauma. So, hence they are called emergency hormones. So, these emergency hormones they bring dilations of the bronchioles, assisting the pulmonary ventilation, increased oxygen uptake during emergency. Then increased metabolic rate, heat production, sweating, increased heart rate, BP. So, then increases blood flow to the internal, decreases the blood flow to the internal organs, increases the blood flow to the skeletal muscles, so that you can see the muscles are provided with lot of oxygen and glucose to bring fight or flight response. So, when emergency situation, face the emergency situation or getting more energy to go away from this emergency situations. So, dilation of the pupils. So, these two hormones differ in the only one function. It is epinephrine decreases peripheral vascular resistance, norepinephrine increases peripheral vascular resistance. So, this is about the emergency hormone. So, this is about the hormones of pancreas and adrenal glands. So, dear students, you know how to use this the key, insulin key, and maintain the glucose balance in your body. It is very, very important. So, maintain proper habits and away from keep away from these lifestyle disorders. Thank you.